Your palm finds the small cabinet under the sink without even looking. Your fingers already know the shape of what they're searching for. The smooth cardboard applicator, the peel-back wrapper, the exact spot on the second shelf where you keep a spare box just in case. You do this without thinking, the same way you'd reach for a light switch in a dark room you've lived in for years. It's ordinary. It's boring even. A 10-second task wedged between brushing your teeth and grabbing your coffee. Now take that away. All of it. No cardboard, no plastic, no cotton spun in a factory, no pharmacy 2 minutes down the road. Go back 300,000 years to a woman standing at the mouth of a cave in what is now South Africa, feeling that same monthly ache low in her stomach, with absolutely nothing waiting for her in a drawer. No modern hygiene product has existed for more than about 150 years, which means for over 99% of human history, women bled through their most physically demanding, most dangerous, most exposed moments. Hunting, fleeing predators, walking 20 miles a day with nothing but their own resourcefulness standing between them and total vulnerability. So the question is simple. For hundreds of thousands of years with no pads, no tampons, and no modern medicine, how did women handle menstruation and still survive? Let's start with the most obvious problem, because it's the one you're probably already thinking about. What did they actually use? Here's what doesn't make sense until you think about it. You'd assume the answer is nothing, they just dealt with it. And that assumption is almost insulting to how clever your ancestors actually were. Archaeologists digging at Sibudu Cave in South Africa, in research published by archaeologist Lynn Wadley in 2011, found layers of carefully arranged plant bedding dating back roughly 77,000 years. Bundles of sedge and rush grasses, some of them containing natural insect-repelling compounds, deliberately selected and layered. That bedding wasn't just for sleeping. Anthropologists studying comparable hunter-gatherer groups have documented near-identical materials. Soft mosses, shredded inner tree bark, dried grasses, used specifically as absorbent padding during menstruation, tucked into hide wrappings worn like an early underlayer. Moss, in particular, shows up again and again in the historical and ethnographic record, from Arctic Inuit communities to indigenous groups in North America, because it does something almost unbelievable for a plant. It can absorb up to 20 times its own weight in liquid. Your ancestors weren't guessing. They were running a multi-generational field test on the natural world, and they found the answer growing at their feet. Here's the part nobody talks about, though. Even with the right material, comfort was never really the point. Survival was. A woman bleeding for 5 days couldn't simply lie down and wait it out. She still had to walk, still had to carry a child on her hip, still had to help haul water or dig roots, because a small hunter-gatherer band couldn't function with one member sidelined for a week every single month. So the padding had to be reusable. Hides were scraped and softened, sometimes soaked and dried in the sun to reduce odor, then reused again and again, the same way you'd reuse a dish towel. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't clean by our standards. But it worked well enough that it kept the human species reproducing successfully for 250,000 years before the first patent for a commercial pad was ever filed. Now here's the problem that almost never gets brought up, and it's the one that should genuinely unsettle you. Blood has a smell, and in the ancient world, smell was a matter of life and death. Think about that for a second. Your ancestors didn't live behind locked doors. They lived in open landscapes stalked by cave lions, hyenas, and leopards. Predators with a sense of smell thousands of times more sensitive than yours. Animals that could detect blood from over a mile away, depending on wind direction. A menstruating woman wasn't just dealing with cramps. She was, in a very literal sense, walking around slightly more visible to the things that wanted to eat her. This is where anthropologists believe menstrual huts and seclusion customs, practices documented in dozens of traditional societies well into the 20th century, may have originated from something far more practical than superstition. Yes, over time, these customs picked up cultural and religious weight, and in some cases became tools of control rather than protection. But the earliest root of the behavior likely wasn't about shame. It was about strategy. Separating from the main group, staying near a controlled fire, avoiding a hunting party's downwind path. These were survival decisions, the kind any experienced tracker would recognize instantly, because they knew exactly how far a predator could smell blood on the wind. What eventually calcified into taboo may have started as something closer to tactical camouflage. That reframes the whole picture, doesn't it? What looks from a modern lens like an oppressive ritual might have begun as one of the most sensible survival adaptations your ancestors ever developed. Let's talk about pain, because this is the part that will genuinely make you wince. No ibuprofen, no heating pad, no hot water bottle. Just cramps in the middle of a life that already demanded constant physical output. But here's the insight that flips the whole assumption on its head. Ancient people were not walking around unmedicated in the way you're picturing. In 2017, researchers analyzing hardened dental plaque from a Neanderthal skeleton at Sibudu Cave in Belgium found chemical traces of salicylic acid, the same active compound found in aspirin, embedded in calcified plaque dating back roughly 50,000 years. That compound comes from willow bark, which multiple ancient cultures, from the Sumerians to the Egyptians to countless indigenous groups across nearly every continent, chewed, brewed, or boiled specifically to reduce pain and inflammation. Your ancestors weren't pharmacists, but they were something almost as good. They were obsessive, generational observers of what worked, quietly refining a natural pharmacy through trial, error, and memory, passed down for tens of thousands of years. Here's what nobody tells you about this part, though. The pain relief wasn't the only unexpected twist. The frequency of the pain itself was completely different from what you experience today, and this fact alone will probably rearrange how you think about your entire body. Anthropologist Beverly Strassman spent years living among and studying the Dogon people of Mali, publishing landmark research in 1997 that quietly reshaped how scientists understand the natural menstrual experience. Dogon women living a lifestyle far closer to that of ancient humans. Later first pregnancies, extended breastfeeding, more pregnancies overall, experienced roughly 100 menstrual cycles across their entire lifetime. Compare that to the average woman in an industrialized country today, who experiences somewhere around 300 to 400 cycles in a lifetime because of earlier puberty, fewer pregnancies, shorter breastfeeding periods, and better nutrition, 3 to 4 times as many periods as your ancient counterpart. Let that sink in. This is the twist that changes everything. The challenge for ancient women wasn't managing menstruation as a constant, monthly, decades-long event the way modern products are marketed to assume. Pregnancy and breastfeeding created long stretches, sometimes years at a time, where periods simply stopped, a biological state called lactational amenorrhea. A woman in a hunter-gatherer band might menstruate only a handful of times before her first pregnancy, then not again for 2 or 3 years while nursing, then a handful more times before the next pregnancy. The relentless monthly cycle you experience is, biologically speaking, closer to an anomaly of modern life than it is to the ancestral default. So the challenge our ancestors faced wasn't smaller than yours. It was different. Rarer, but layered with higher physical stakes. No painkiller aisle, no privacy, predators in the wind, and a body that had to keep functioning at full capacity regardless. Let's move past prehistory for a moment, because the ingenuity didn't stop once humans started building cities. It just got more inventive. In ancient Egypt, medical texts like the Ebers Papyrus, dated to roughly 1550 BCE, describe the use of softened papyrus reeds as absorbent material, rolled and shaped for internal use. An early ancestor of the modern tampon, invented over 3,000 years before the first commercial version was patented in the United States in 1931. In ancient Greece, the physician Hippocrates documented the use of small bundles of soft wool, referred to in some historical translations as pesos, used in a similar fashion. Roman women reportedly used wool as well, alongside softened cloth. Across nearly every ancient culture archaeologists and historians have studied, the pattern repeats with almost eerie consistency. Absorbent natural material, folded or rolled, adapted to the body, refined generation after generation. Here's the moment that should genuinely humble you. The core engineering problem behind the modern tampon, absorbent material, compact, internal, disposable, or reusable, was essentially solved by ancient Egyptian medicine 3,500 years ago. We didn't invent the solution. We industrialized it, mass-produced it, and wrapped it in plastic. The idea itself is nearly as old as written language. Zoom out for a second, because there's something bigger happening underneath all of this. Every single problem menstruation created for your ancestors, the mess, the pain, the exposure to predators, the physical demands of daily survival, was met over and over with an answer built from nothing but close observation of the natural world and the accumulated memory of women who came before. No factories, no pharmaceutical labs, no internet full of product reviews, just moss that happened to absorb 20 times its weight, bark that happened to numb pain, and instincts sharp enough to know that blood carried on the wind was a danger worth avoiding. That's not primitive. That's applied science, tested across thousands of generations, refined by the harshest quality control system imaginable, survival itself. And here's the part that should really stop you in your tracks. This wasn't a footnote in the story of human evolution. It was central to it. A species that couldn't figure out how to keep half its population functional, mobile, and protected for 1 week out of every month would not have lasted 300,000 years. The fact that you exist at all, that an unbroken chain of ancestors survived pregnancy, survived menstruation, survived predators drawn in by scent, survived without a single modern convenience, is itself a kind of quiet, staggering achievement. It just never gets celebrated because it happened in silence, generation after generation, without a single monument built to it. Menstruation came at your ancestors with 4 separate weapons, all at once. No absorbent material waiting on a shelf, no painkillers beyond what the forest could offer, real physical danger from predators drawn by scent, and a body that still had to hunt, forage, and carry a child no matter what. And they answered every single one: moss and soft bark for absorption, willow bark, chewed and brewed for the pain, seclusion and strategic distance for safety, and an intimate generational understanding of their own bodies that let them work with biology instead of fighting it. Zoom out even further, and the whole thing becomes almost philosophical. We tend to imagine progress as a straight line. Primitive people struggling in the dark, modern people finally living in the light. But menstruation tells a different story. It tells you that ingenuity has always existed, that resourcefulness is not a modern invention, and that the women walking through the Pleistocene with moss tucked against their skin were solving the exact same problem you solve every month, just with different tools and far higher stakes. So the next time your hand reaches into that cabinet under the sink without even looking, notice what you're actually holding. It's cotton and plastic and adhesive, engineered in a factory somewhere you'll never see. But the idea behind it, magiging soft, absorbent, folded to the body, replaced when needed, that idea is at least 300,000 years old, carried forward by women who had no packaging, no privacy, and no promise that any of it would work. It worked anyway. It had to. Your ancestors didn't have pads. They had moss, bark, fire, and each other. And somehow, that was enough to keep the entire human race alive.